The galaxy wondered why humanity sent one vessel. Then the cannons roared. Part 1. The summons, the Galactic Assembly, had existed for 12,000 years. It was a gathering of 847 different species from across the galaxy, and they had built something remarkable together. They traded with each other. They solved problems through talking. They kept peace through the simple fact that no single species could fight against all the others combined. The peace never lasts forever. The Veth Dominion came from the edge of the galaxy, from the dark spaces between stars where few species dared to travel. They were conquerors. They did not join the assembly. They did not ask for trade agreements. They simply took what they wanted, and what they wanted was everything. When the Veth began their march toward the core worlds, the assembly did what it had always done. It called for unity. It sent messages to every member species, demanding that they send warships to form a defensive fleet. The threat was clear. If the Veth reached the core worlds, the assembly itself would fall. Captain Yuna received a message aboard her ship, the Baekdu. She was 43 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and calm eyes that had seen both peace and war. She had commanded the Baekdu for 7 years, and she knew every sound the ship made, every vibration in its hull. The Baekdu was not a pretty ship. It was a kilometer long, painted in matte black that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Its hull was thick and angular, designed not for beauty but for survival. Along its sides were sealed panels that hid weapons the assembly had never seen. Humanity had been part of the assembly for only 60 years. In a gathering of ancient species, they were children. The oldest members had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. They looked at humanity and saw potential, perhaps, but not power. Not yet. When the human delegation stood before the assembly to announce their contribution to the defensive fleet, the great chamber fell silent. Representatives from hundreds of species watched from their seats, their translators humming softly as they waited for the announcement. Ambassador Sora spoke for humanity. She was a small woman with a voice that carried. The United Earth government has heard the assembly's call. We understand the threat. We will send one vessel to join the defensive fleet. The silence stretched for 3 long seconds. Then the laughter began. It started with the Skethri, an insectoid species known for their massive hive fleets. Their ambassador, a creature with 6 arms and compound eyes, made a clicking sound that the translator rendered as amusement. One vessel? The humans sent one vessel against the Veth Armada. Perhaps they misunderstand the numbers involved. The Delori representative, a being that resembled a floating jellyfish in a water-filled suit, pulsed with colors that indicated pity. We had hoped for more from our youngest members. Perhaps they simply do not have more to give. Other species joined in. Some laughed openly. Others shook their heads or made gestures of disappointment. Even humanity's few allies in the assembly looked away, embarrassed on their behalf. Ambassador Sora stood still through all of it. Her expression did not change. When the noise died down, she spoke again. One vessel will be enough. More laughter. The Skethri ambassador clicked rapidly. One vessel against 20,000? Human confidence is entertaining, if nothing else. Sora smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We shall see. 3 weeks later, the Baekdu arrived at the assembly staging point. 6,000 warships had gathered there, representing over 200 species. They came in all shapes and sizes. The Skethri brought their massive carrier hives. The Delori contributed their graceful waterships. The Korthan Empire sent angular battle cruisers bristling with beam weapons. And then there was the Baekdu. One ship, alone. Admiral Taiwan commanded the combined fleet from his flagship, the Assembly's pride. He was not human, but he had studied humans carefully. His species, the Rithani, were known for their tactical minds and their patience. He had lived for 300 years and commanded fleets in 7 different conflicts. He contacted the Baidu directly, his face appearing on Captain Yuna's view screen. His skin was pale blue, his eyes large and dark. "Captain Yuna, I have reviewed your vessel's specifications. I confess I do not understand what your government intends." Yuna stood on her bridge, surrounded by her crew. Lieutenant Jisoo sat at the weapons console, her fingers resting lightly on controls that could unleash destruction the Admiral could not imagine. Commander Hyan stood at her captain's side, his face carefully neutral. Ensign Murray monitored communications, listening to the chatter from the gathered fleet. "Admiral," Yuna replied, "I understand your confusion, but I ask for your patience. When the Veth arrive, you will understand." Taiwan's large eyes studied her through the screen. "The Veth Armada numbers 20,000 ships. We have 6,000. The mathematics are already difficult. One additional ship, no matter how capable, cannot change those numbers significantly. With respect, Admiral, you are thinking about this the wrong way. Then explain it to me." Yuna considered her words carefully. "The assembly species have been at peace for a very long time. You have forgotten what war truly looks like. You build ships designed to disable and capture. You fight with precision and restraint. This is civilized. This is admirable." She paused. "But it is not how humans fight." Taiwan leaned forward slightly. "And how do humans fight, Captain?" "We fight to win. Completely. Absolutely. We do not disable enemy ships. We destroy them. We do not capture territory. We burn it so thoroughly that no enemy can ever use it again." Yuna's voice remained calm, but there was something in her eyes that made the Admiral uncomfortable. Humanity spent most of its history at war with itself. We perfected the art of killing long before we reached the stars. The Baidu is the result of 10,000 years of learning how to destroy things bigger than ourselves. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. "You speak of your own species as if you are monsters." "No," Yuna said softly. "We are survivors. There's a difference. Monsters kill because they enjoy it. Survivors kill because they must. And when we must kill, Admiral, we do it very, very well." She ended the communication. On the bridge of the Baidu, Commander Hyam let out a slow breath. "Do you think he believed you?" "No," Yuna admitted. "But he will. Soon enough, they all will." Lieutenant Jisoo looked up from her console. "The fleet has assigned us to the rear guard, Captain, behind the support vessels." Yuna almost smiled. "Of course they have. They think we are useless. They think we are here to die bravely and nothing more." She walked to the center of the bridge and looked at the view screen, where 6,000 ships floated in formation, preparing for a battle they might not survive. "Let them think what they want," she said. "When the cannons roar, they will learn the truth." The galaxy wondered why humanity sent one vessel, then the cannons. Roared Part 2. The gathering storm, the Korath system was the last line of defense before the core worlds. It was a dead system, with no living planets, just rocks and ice floating around the dying red star. The assembly had chosen it because there was nothing to protect there, nothing to lose except ships and lives. Admiral Taiwan arranged his fleet in the traditional crescent formation. It was a tactic as old as space warfare itself. The ships spread out in a curved line across the system's asteroid belt, ready to catch the enemy in a crossfire from multiple angles. It was elegant. It was proven. It had won battles for thousands of years. The Baidu was placed at the very back of the formation, behind the medical ships and supply vessels. It was the position given to ships that were not expected to fight. A polite insult, dressed up as a tactical decision. Captain Yuna accepted the assignment without complaint. She knew what the Admiral was thinking. One human ship could not matter. Better to keep it out of the way, where it would not interfere with real warships doing real work. On the bridge, Lieutenant Jisoo struggled to hide her anger. She was young, only 28, but she had trained her entire adult life for this moment. She knew what the Baekdu could do. She knew what those hidden cannons could unleash. And now they were sitting in the back, useless. "This is wrong," she said quietly, her hands tight on the weapons console. "We should be at the front. We should be leading the charge." Commander Hyan stood nearby, his arms crossed. He was older than Jisoo, more experienced, and he understood politics better than she did. "They do not know what we can do. They see one ship from a young species. What would you expect them to think?" "I would expect them to trust us," Jisoo shot back. "We are here to help. We came when they called." "Trust is earned," Captain Yuna said from her command chair. Her voice was calm, as it always was. "We have not earned it yet, but we will." Ensign Myray looked up from her communication station. "Captain, I am detecting something." Jump signatures at the edge of the system. The bridge went quiet. Everyone turned to look at the main view screen. The Veth had arrived. They came out of jump space in waves. The first wave was 5,000 ships. Then another 5,000. Then more and more, until the sensors could barely keep track of them all. The numbers climbed higher and higher. 20,000, Myray reported, her voice tight. Then 25,000. A pause. 30,000, and still counting. Yuna leaned forward in her chair. "Final count? 32,000 ships, Captain. More than 5 times the size of our fleet." On the fleet-wide communication channel, chaos erupted. Voices shouted over each other in dozens of languages. The translators struggled to keep up. Fear spread through the combined fleet like a disease. "This is impossible," the Skethri ambassador screamed. "Our intelligence said 20,000. We were told 20,000. We should retreat," another voice demanded. "Fall back to the core worlds. Regroup with additional forces." "There are no additional forces," someone else shouted. "This is everything we have." Admiral Taiwan's voice cut through the noise, trying to restore order. "All ships, maintain formation." We knew the numbers would be difficult. We planned for this. But he had not planned for this. No one had. The assembly had expected a hard fight against 20,000 ships. Against 32,000, the mathematics changed from difficult to impossible. Commander Hyan stepped closer to Yuna. "Captain, the coalition is falling apart. They are already blaming each other." Yuna could hear it on the channel. The Skethri accused the Delori of providing bad intelligence. The Delori blamed the Korthan Empire for not sending enough ships. Old grudges that have been buried for centuries suddenly rose to the surface. Fear did that to people. It made them stupid. It made them turn on their allies. "The Veth have not fired a single shot," Yuna observed. "And we are already defeating ourselves." Chief Engineer Dongu's voice came through the internal communication system from the engine room. "Captain, we are at full power. All systems ready. Weapons charged and waiting. Just give the word." Yuna did not respond immediately. She watched the view screen, where the Veth Armada hung like a cloud of death at the edge of the system. They were waiting too, watching, perhaps enjoying the fear they caused. The fleet channel continued to drown in arguments. Admiral Taiwan's attempts to restore calm were failing. Several species were already moving their ships out of formation, preparing to flee. "If we do nothing," Hyan said quietly, "the battle will be lost before it begins." Yuna nodded slowly. She had hoped to stay in the background, to support the main fleet from behind. But that was no longer possible. The coalition needed something to believe in. They needed to see that victory was possible. She opened a channel to the entire fleet. Her voice was calm and clear, cutting through the noise like a knife. All vessels, this is the Baekdu. I am Captain Yuna of the United Earth Navy. Clear a corridor through the center of your formation. We are moving to the front. For a moment, there was silence. Then the Skethri ambassador spoke, her translator rendering her clicking voice into words dripping with disbelief. You? The single human ship? You want to move to the front? Yes, Yuna said simply. That is suicide, Admiral Taiwan said. One ship against 32,000? You will be destroyed in seconds. Perhaps, Yuna admitted. But perhaps not. You brought us here, Admiral. You asked humanity to fight alongside you. This is how we fight. Not from behind. Not in safety. We fight at the front, where we can see the enemy's eyes. Lieutenant Jisu's fingers flew across her console, preparing the weapon systems. Her earlier anger was gone, replaced by something colder, more focused. Commander Hyan moved to the tactical station, ready to coordinate with the main fleet. Ensign Myray adjusted the communication arrays to handle the increased traffic that was coming. The Baekdu began to move. Its engines flared with blue light as it accelerated forward, past the medical ships, past the supply vessels, past the rear guard and the reserves. Some ships moved aside to let it pass. Others simply watched in confusion. The Skethri carriers did not move at all, forcing the Baekdu to go around them. Perhaps they hoped the human ship would give up. Perhaps they wanted to see it destroyed, but the Baekdu kept moving, steady, unstoppable. A single black shape cutting through the heart of the assembly fleet. Admiral Taiwan watched from his flagship. He had studied humans. He had read their history. He knew about their wars, their weapons, their terrible capacity for violence. But he had never truly believed it. Humans seemed so small, so fragile, so young. Now, watching that single ship move toward certain death without hesitation, he began to understand. Clear the corridor, he ordered his fleet. Let them through. Admiral? His tactical officer asked in confusion. Let them through, Taiwan repeated. And pray to whatever gods you believe in that they know what they are doing. The Baekdu passed the final line of assembly ships and emerged into the empty space. Between the two fleets, alone, 1 kilometer of human engineering facing 32,000 enemy warships. On the bridge, Captain Yuna stood from her chair. All hands, battle stations. This is what we came here for. The crew responded instantly. Stations lit up across the ship as every system reached full readiness. In the weapons bay, massive railgun rounds loaded into firing chambers. In the engine room, Dongwu pushed the reactors to maximum output. The Veth Armada began to move forward, and humanity prepared to show the galaxy what it truly meant to fight. The galaxy wondered why humanity sent one vessel. Then the cannons roared. Part 3. The one that stepped forward, the Baekdu, hung alone in the darkness between two armies. Behind it, 6,000 assembly ships waited in their crescent formation, watching with a mixture of confusion and pity. Most of them expected the human vessel to die quickly. Some hoped it would at least buy them a few extra seconds to prepare. A few wondered if the humans had simply gone mad. Ahead of it, 32,000 Veth warships advanced like a wave of steel and fire. Their formation was simple but effective. A massive wedge designed to punch through enemy lines and scatter them into chaos. They had conquered 17 systems using this exact tactic. It always worked. Overlord Krath commanded the Veth Armada from his flagship, a vessel 3 times the size of the Baekdu. He was old for a Veth, nearly 200 years, and he had led more conquests than he could remember. He looked at the single human ship and felt something he had not felt in decades. Amusement. He opened the broadcast to all frequencies, ensuring that both his own fleet and the assembly could hear him. Is this a joke? The Great Galactic Assembly sends one ship to face us? Have they surrendered already and forgotten to tell us? Laughter rippled through the Veth fleet. On the assembly side, there was only silence, shame. Captain Una stood on her bridge, listening to the enemy commander mock her. Her face showed no emotion. Beside her, Commander Hyan tracked the approaching Veth formation on his tactical display. Behind them, Lieutenant Jisoo waited at the weapons console, her fingers hovering over controls she had dreamed of using her entire career. The Veth have designated us as a non-threat, Ensign Mireille reported from communications. Their tactical channels are calling us a symbolic gesture and a mercy kill. Good, Una said softly. Let them think that. She walked slowly across the bridge to the weapons station, where Jisoo sat rigid with anticipation. The young lieutenant looked up at her captain with eyes that burned with barely contained fire. You have trained for this moment, Una said. You know what these weapons can do. The assembly does not know. The Veth do not know. When I give the order, you will show them. Jisoo nodded once, sharply. Yes, Captain. Una turned to face the view screen. The Veth Armada was getting closer. 500,000 kilometers. 400,000. At their current speed, they would be in optimal weapons range within minutes. Lieutenant, Una said, activate primary weapons array. Jisoo pressed a sequence of commands. Along the hull of the Baekdu, hidden panels began to slide open. The sound traveled through the ship like distant thunder, a deep mechanical rumbling that made the deck plates vibrate. What emerged from those panels were not the elegant beam projectors used by assembly species. They were not the missile launches favored by the Veth. They were something else entirely. Magnetic. Accelerators, railguns, weapons that used electromagnetic force to throw solid metal at speeds that defied imagination. The assembly preferred energy weapons because they were precise and clean. The Veth preferred missiles because they were cheap and plentiful. Humans had taken a different path. Humans had asked themselves a simple question. What is the most destructive thing we can throw at our enemies? The answer was mass moving at appreciable fractions of the speed of light. Each railgun on the Baekdu was 300 meters long, running through the core of the ship like a spine of destruction. The projectiles were tungsten rods the size of ground vehicles, dense and heavy, and utterly without mercy. When fired, they would cross the distance between ships in seconds. When they hit, nothing could stop them. Admiral Taiwan watched from his flagship as the human ship transformed. He had seen the specifications, but specifications were just numbers on a screen. Seeing the actual weapons emerge was different. His tactical officer made a sound of disbelief. Admiral, those are kinetic weapons. Mass drivers. I have not seen such primitive technology in centuries. Primitive? Taiwan's voice was quiet. Or so effective that we forgot how to use them. The Skethri ambassador, watching from her carrier hive, clicked in confusion. Why would anyone use solid projectiles? Energy weapons are superior in every way. But Taiwan was beginning to understand. Energy weapons were precise. They could be tuned to disable rather than destroy. They could be blocked by shields and absorbed by armor. They were civilized. The weapons emerging from the Baekdu were not civilized. They were not meant to disable. They were meant to kill. To destroy completely. To leave nothing but debris and memory. Overlord Krath also noticed the human ship's transformation. His amusement faded slightly. He recognized the weapons for what they were, even if he did not fully understand their capabilities. His own species had used similar technology in their early days, before they discovered more sophisticated methods. Interesting, he murmured. The humans use antique weapons. Perhaps they think nostalgia will save them. He gave an order to his fleet. Target the human vessel. Destroy it first, as a message to the rest. 10,000 Veth ships adjusted their aim. Targeting systems locked onto the Baekdu. Weapons charged and prepared to fire. On the Baekdu's bridge, Ensign Marie's voice was tight. "Captain, we are being targeted by approximately 10,000 enemy vessels." "I see them," Yuna replied calmly. Commander Hyam looked at his captain. "They will fire in less than 30 seconds. Then we should fire first." Yuna returned to her command chair and sat down. She looked at the view screen one more time, at the massive enemy armada bearing down on them. So many ships, so many weapons, so many beings who believed they were about to witness a slaughter. They were right. They were about to witness a slaughter. They were simply wrong about who would be slaughtered. "Grandfather," Yuna said, addressing the ship's artificial intelligence, "confirm all weapons are ready." The IAS voice was calm and deep, like a patient elder. "All primary weapons at full charge. Targeting solutions calculated for 400 simultaneous targets. Ready to fire on your command, Captain. 400 targets." The assembly's best ships could engage perhaps 20 enemies at once. The Baekdu could destroy 400 in a single volley. Yuna took a slow breath. She thought of Earth so far away. She thought of the people who had built this ship, who had poured their knowledge and their fear and their hope into every plate of armor and every meter of railgun. They had built the Baekdu for exactly this moment. A moment when humanity would stand alone against an impossible enemy. "Lieutenant Jisoo," Yuna said. Jisoo looked at her captain, her hands steady on the firing controls. "Fire!" The Baekdu roared. There was no other word for it. The magnetic accelerators activated simultaneously, hurling tungsten rods into the void at velocities that made them blur even on sensors. The ship shuddered with the release of so much kinetic energy. Lights flickered across the bridge as the reactors struggled to compensate for the massive power drain. And then the projectiles hit. Veth shields were designed to disperse energy. They could absorb laser beams and deflect plasma bursts. But they could not stop solid metal moving at 20% of light speed. The tungsten rods punched through shields like they did not exist. They tore through armor like paper. They turned warships into expanding clouds of superheated gas and spinning debris. 300 Veth ships died in 4 seconds. The galaxy would never forget those 4 seconds. The galaxy wondered why humanity sent one vessel. Then the cannons roared. Part 4. The roar of thunder, the Veth. Formation shattered like glass struck by a hammer. 300 ships gone in the first 4 seconds. 300 more gone in the next 4. The tungsten rods kept coming, one volley after another, each one precise and devastating. The Baekdu's railguns fired again and again, the ship shaking with each release of kinetic fury. Overlord Krath stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Red icons representing destroyed ships blinked out of existence faster than he could count them. The neat wedge formation of his armada was dissolving into chaos as ships broke away to avoid the human vessel's fire. "What is happening?" he demanded. "What are those weapons?" His tactical officers had no answers. Their instruments screamed warnings about incoming projectiles. But the projectiles moved so fast that by the time the warnings appeared, the ships were already dead. There was no time to dodge. No time to reinforce shields. No time for anything except dying. "Focus fire on that ship!" Krath roared. "Destroy it now!" The Veth fleet responded. Thousands of weapons locked onto the Baekdu, and thousands of weapons fired. Missiles streaked through space. Energy beams carved bright lines across the darkness. The combined firepower of an empire's military descended on a single human vessel. On the Baekdu's bridge, Captain Yuna gripped her command chair as the first impacts struck. The ship lurched violently. Alarms screamed. Emergency lights painted everything in angry red. "Brace for impact." Commander Hyan shouted. "All hands, race!" The Veth weapon struck the Bekdu's hull like a storm. Energy beams splashed against the thick armor plating, dissipating their power across the surface. Missiles exploded against the outer hull, tearing away chunks of metal but failing to reach the inner compartments. The ship shook and groaned, but it did not break. The Bekdu's armor was not elegant. It was not efficient. It was thick and heavy and incredibly expensive. Layer upon layer of reinforced alloys designed by a species that understood one fundamental truth. Sometimes, you just have to take the hit. Humanity had spent its entire history being hurt. Floods and famines, plagues and wars, disasters both natural and self-inflicted. They had learned that survival was not about avoiding damage. It was about enduring damage, about getting back up after being knocked down, about refusing to die no matter how hard the universe tried to kill them. The Bekdu was built to endure. "Damage report," Yuna called out. Chief Engineer Dong Wu's voice came through the communication system, steady despite the chaos around him. "Outer hull breached in 7 sections. Inner hull holding. Minor fires on decks 3 and 5. Suppression systems active. Weapons are still operational. Captain, we can take more." "Good," Yuna said. She turned to Lieutenant Jisoo. "Keep firing. Do not stop until I tell you to stop." Jisoo's hands danced across her console, selecting targets and triggering volleys. The Bekdu's AI, grandfather, worked alongside her, calculating trajectories and prioritizing threats. Together, human and machine turned the ship into a continuous fountain of destruction. The assembly fleet watched in stunned silence. The Skethri ambassador had stopped making her clicking sounds of amusement. The Delori representative's colors had shifted to patterns that indicated shock and awe. Even Admiral Taiwan, who had thought he understood humans, found himself unable to speak. The human ship should have been destroyed by now. Any assembly vessel would have been torn apart by that much firepower. But the Bekdu continued to fight, continued to fire, continued to exist despite everything the Veth threw at it. And it was winning. Veth ships died by the hundreds. Their formations collapsed into chaos as captains abandoned tactics in favor of simple survival. Some tried to flee. The Bekdu's railguns found them anyway, turning their retreat into expanding clouds of debris. Others tried to charge forward, hoping to overwhelm the human vessel at close range. They died faster than the ones who ran. Overlord Kroth watched his armada die and felt something he had not experienced in 2 centuries of warfare. Fear. "How?" he whispered. "How is this possible?" His tactical officer's voice was shaking. "Overlord, we have lost 4,000 ships. The human vessel shows no signs of failing. Its fire rate has not decreased. We cannot stop it. 4,000 ships. 12% of his armada destroyed by a single enemy vessel. This was not warfare. This was slaughter." On the assembly side, Admiral Taiwan finally found his voice. He opened a channel to his fleet, his calm tone barely hiding his own astonishment. "All ships, advance. Support the Bekdu, now." "Admiral?" Several voices questioned. "The human ship has created an opening," Taiwan explained. "The Veth formation is broken. Their coordination is gone. If we strike now, we can turn this battle." He paused. "If we wait, we waste everything the humans have given us." The assembly fleet began to move. 6,000 ships accelerated forward, spreading out to engage the scattered Veth forces. For the first time since the battle began, they stopped being spectators and became participants. Captain Yuna noticed the movement on her tactical display. Despite the damage alarms and the shaking deck, She allowed herself a small smile. The coalition was fighting. The coalition was following her lead. "Commander Hyan," she said, "coordinate with the Admiral's flagship. Identify priority targets and share our firing solutions." Hyan worked quickly, establishing a link with the Assembly's tactical network. The data flow began, human targeting computers sharing information with Assembly systems, teaching them where to aim and when to fire. The battle shifted. The Veth, already reeling from the Bekdu's assault, now faced attacks from multiple directions. Assembly ships poured fire into their broken formations. Skethri fighters launched from their carrier hives, swarming over damaged Veth vessels. Delori waterships coordinated their beam weapons with precision, exploiting weaknesses the human ship had revealed. But the Veth were not finished. Overlord Krath gathered his remaining forces into a tight cluster around his flagship. If he could not win through numbers, he would try one final desperate attack. Every ship he had left turned toward the Bekdu and charged. "Captain," Ensign Murray reported, "approximately 18,000 enemy ships are converging on our position." 18,000 ships. Even for the Bekdu, that was too many. "How long until they reach us?" Yuna asked. 6 minutes. Yuna nodded slowly. She looked at her crew, at the people who had trusted her to lead them into this impossible fight. They were tired. They were bruised. Some of them were bleeding, but none of them showed any sign of giving up. "Then we have 6 minutes to kill as many of them as possible," she said. "Grandfather, maximum fire rate." Lieutenant Jisoo showed them what humanity can do. The Bekdu's cannons roared again, louder than before, faster than before. The ship became a hurricane of kinetic death, throwing tungsten rods into the advancing enemy fleet with relentless fury. The reactors screamed under the strain. The hull groaned as weapons fired beyond their rated limits, but the Veth kept coming. And 6 minutes was a very long time. On the Assembly flagship, Admiral Taiwan made a decision. He opened a channel to his entire fleet. "All ships full speed. We reach the Bekdu in 3 minutes, or we lose them." The coalition surged forward. 6,000 ships racing to save one, and the clock continued to count down. The galaxy wondered why humanity sent one vessel. Then the cannons roared Part 5. Why one was enough. The Battle of Korath lasted 11 hours. When it was over, the Veth Armada had lost 18,000 ships. 14,000 survivors fled back to the Galactic Rim, carrying stories that would become legends, then nightmares. Then warnings passed from generation to generation. Never again would the Veth Dominion threaten the core worlds. Never again would they underestimate the galaxy's youngest species. The Assembly lost 800 ships. 800 against an enemy that outnumbered them more than 5 to 1. Military analysts would study this battle for centuries, trying to understand how such a victory was possible. The answer was always the same. One ship had made the difference. One ship had broken the enemy's formation. One ship had shown the galaxy what humanity could do. The Bekdu limped back to the staging point, her hull scarred with the marks of 10,000 impacts. Entire sections of her outer armor were simply gone, blasted away by Veth weapons. Smoke leaked from breaches that the emergency systems had sealed but could not repair. Her engines flickered and sputtered, barely able to maintain minimum speed, but she was alive. Against all odds, against all expectations, the Bekdu had survived. Captain Yuna was the last to leave the bridge. She walked slowly through the corridors of her wounded ship, stepping over debris and around repair teams. Lieutenant Jisoo had collapsed at her station from exhaustion and had been carried to the medical bay. Commander Hyan was coordinating damage reports, his voice hoarse from hours of shouting orders. Ensign Murray sat in a corner of the communications room, crying quietly, releasing the fear she had held inside throughout the battle. Chief Engineer Dongwu met Yuna at the main airlock. His face was covered in soot and burns, and his left arm hung in a makeshift sling. But he was smiling. "We made it, Captain," he said. "The ship is hurt, but she will fly again. I will make sure of it." Yuna placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know you will. Take care of her, Dongwu. She earned it." The airlock opened, and Yuna stepped out onto the docking platform. Admiral Taiwan was waiting for her. He stood alone, having dismissed his guards and aides. His pale blue face was unreadable, but his large, dark eyes studied the human captain with something that might have been wonder. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply looked at each other. Two commanders from two very different species, bound together by a battle that had changed everything. Finally, Taiwan spoke. "Why only one ship?" Yuna had expected this question. She had been thinking about how to answer it since before the battle began. She looked past the admiral at the gathered fleet, at the thousands of ships from hundreds of species that had come together to face a common enemy. "Because sending more would have frightened you as much as the Veth," she said. Taiwan's brow furrowed. "I do not understand." Yuna took a slow breath. "Humanity has 12 ships like the Baekdu. 12 vessels built for exactly this kind of war. We could have sent them all. We could have ended the Veth in a day." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But then you would have looked at us differently. You would have seen us not as allies, but as threats. You would have wondered when we might turn those weapons against you." The admiral was silent, considering her words. "We are the youngest species in the assembly," Yuna continued. 60 years among civilizations that have existed for thousands. We are not trusted. We are not respected. We are tolerated at best and mocked at worst." She gestured toward the damaged Baekdu. "One ship was enough to turn the tide of this battle. One ship was enough to prove what we can do. And one ship is something the assembly can live with." Taiwan's expression shifted, understanding dawning in his ancient eyes. "You limited yourselves deliberately. You showed enough strength to be useful, but not so much that you would be feared. Yes, that is very calculated." Yuna almost smiled. "We've had a long time to think about how to introduce ourselves to the galaxy. We knew this day would come. We prepared for it." The admiral was quiet for another long moment. Then he reached out his hand, palm up, in a gesture that Yuna recognized. It was a human custom he had learned, a sign of greeting and respect. "Welcome to the galaxy, Captain," he said. Yuna took his hand. Her grip was firm, despite her exhaustion. "We have been waiting 60 years to hear that." Around them, the staging point hummed with activity. Ships moved back and forth, carrying wounded, transferring supplies, beginning the long process of recovery. The Skethri ambassador, who had laughed at humanity's single ship, now watched the Baekdu with something like reverence. The Delori representative had requested a formal meeting with Earth's government to discuss military cooperation. The galaxy had changed. In a single battle, humanity had risen from the bottom of the Assembly's hierarchy to something approaching equals. Not through diplomacy, not through trade, through the oldest and most universal language of all. War. In the weeks that followed, the Veth Dominion collapsed. The defeat at Karath had broken more than their fleet. It had broken their spirit. Systems they had conquered began to rebel. Warlords fought each other for the scraps of power. Within a decade, the great enemy that had threatened the entire galaxy would be nothing but a memory. The Baekdu was repaired, upgraded, and returned to Earth's defensive fleet. Captain Yuna was promoted to Admiral. She never commanded another battle. She did not need to. Her name alone was enough to make enemies reconsider their choices. The Galactic Assembly formally elevated humanity to full standing membership, with all rights and responsibilities. Human ships began to appear throughout the galaxy, trading and exploring and learning. They were still young. They were still learning. But they were no longer ignored. And in the archives of 1,000 species, a new entry was recorded. It was short and simple, but it said everything that needed to be said. Humans, do not underestimate. Do not provoke. They fight not to defeat their enemies, but to destroy them. They build weapons not for precision, but for annihilation. They survived 1,000 generations of war against each other before they reached the stars. If they send one ship, be grateful. Be very, very grateful that they only sent one. Because if they ever decide to send more, there will be nothing left to remember why. On Earth, in a small office overlooking the Pacific Ocean, Ambassador Sora read the updated assembly records. She smiled, remembering the laughter that had filled the chamber when she announced humanity's contribution to the war effort. One vessel. It had been enough. It would always be enough. But somewhere in the deep shipyards of Luna, 11 sister ships to the Baekdu waited in the darkness. Their cannons were cold. Their crews were patient. They hoped they would never be needed. The galaxy, they believed, had learned its lesson. And if it ever forgot, they would be there to remind it.